You are listening to and streaming a More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and no better conversation than a conversation with friends, especially given the topsy-turvy headlines that we are all struggling to keep up with and to digest and make sense of and figure out what we gonna do. Welcome to the show, Al Reynolds, one of our favorite political and pop culture contributors, and Vincent Jones, the CEO of Beyond Impact. Welcome to a More Perfect Union.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. I feel like I have to wait a week to come back on. I feel like some kind of way, but all right, I'll do every other week.
You said what? What'd you say, Al?
What, I have to wait every other week? I feel some kind of way because I'll be ready to jump in, coach. Put me in the game.
Well, Al, we go. Your wish is my command. We're gonna figure that out. But one thing that Democrats are stuck on right now is what is afoot right now in South Carolina. I'm not sure if you all heard, but Republican South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster, he actually plans to call a special session to redraw South Carolina's House maps. He's expected to announce the special election on redistricting, teeing up the state legislature to pass a Republican gerrymander that would almost certainly cost Democratic Representative Jim Clyburn his seat in this year's midterm election. Clyburn, I want to remind our leaders, learners, and listeners, is the sole Democrat in South Carolina's House delegation. The new map would dismantle his district, leaving the state with 7 likely red seats and no Democratic leaning seats. You know, yesterday there was a little glimmer of hope because South Carolina State Senator Massey, a Republican, actually stood up to Trump and he said, "We ain't doing this here in South Carolina." And I thought, oh my, what, didn't see that coming. Look at that plot twist. Likely to be short-lived, but look at that. A little glimmer of hope. And then today we see Governor McMaster of South Carolina say to Trump, "Your wish is my command." Vincent, what do you make of what is playing out in South Carolina? And are you reading it at all a little bit different than what we've seen in Tennessee, what we've seen in Louisiana and other places?
Have you seen that movie Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox?
Of course.
Well, it feels like that because we're going back to the future, and Back to the Future was a racist past. And it's ironic that it's starting in the South, that where all of these tactics and techniques were used to disenfranchise Black people who are newly given the right to vote. And they're going back to that. You know, I live in LA where when I submit my ballot, I get a text message to tell me that my ballot has been received. Even before what happened today in South Carolina or the decision last week with the Calais decision in the Supreme Court, voting rights in the South were very restrictive. You could not vote early. You cannot vote anywhere but your polling place. There are all these burdens put up to make it difficult for people to vote. And what they're doing now is going to dilute the power that people have to be able to elect people who reflect their values and their wishes and their aspirations. And we all should be afraid of that.
Yeah. Al, I mean, you're no stranger to the Carolinas. You know them well.
That's right.
What do you make of this latest development?
This latest development is quite clear. This isn't governance. This is strategic control dressed up as law, which is the most infuriating part of it all. But my thing is, when politicians have to redraw maps just to win, then you already know what it is. This isn't protecting democracy. This is about them protecting their ability to get their seats, right? So what I say for everybody in all those southern states, because this is only the beginning, let's be very clear. One thing that we have to do is we have to throw this into the court system, and we have to throw it in the court system quickly. More than that, we have to start to all of the districts, all of the parts of the maps that are affected. We have to make sure that those people are still getting out to vote regardless. See, that's the key. We have to mobilize. And on top of that, we have to continue to expose this injustice. This filthy play is what I call it. It's unfair, it's unethical, and it always affects who? The Black and brown voters the most, the communities of color. We have got to be smarter about this, and we've got to be strategic. You know, I've said it here on this show several times. We've got to get gutter about this. We got to raise up our sleeves, and we got to be smarter. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and one of the things that I've been thinking about today, especially with regard to South Carolina, we know that Jim Clyburn, Representative Clyburn, you know, has been in House Democratic leadership for some time now. And you both know that one of the top jobs, one of the top priorities for every single member of Congress is to bring home the bacon, to bring home resources to their district. According to some sources, as early as this year, Congressman Clyburn secured significant federal funding for South Carolina, including $50 million in community project funding for his district, key investments focusing on infrastructure, education, healthcare, and $850 million for battery manufacturing to create jobs. And so, you know, even for Republicans, you know, who may not be checking for blue, but they're checking for green, it's like this is a member of Congress that is bringing resources back to the state, and still that doesn't matter. What critique does that offer when it comes to, you know, the current state of our capitalist system here in the United States, Vincent?
Well, before getting to that, I want to give an additional angle to example you just gave. In Watts, in the community of Watts, which is a community in Los Angeles, it's a small community. I don't know the geographic area, but it's very, very small. At one point, it was divided into 3 different districts. And I don't know if you remember, about 10 or 15 years ago, there was like a freak hailstorm that hit Watts. People's roofs were caved in. There was a lot of damage, but because it was divided across so many districts, no one came to do anything about it. And this is an impact of redistricting and the way that Republicans are doing it across the South and across the country that people don't think about. It's not just about the great point you made about bringing home the bacon, but it impacts real people on an everyday basis. It's not about who controls Congress, but how are you getting your services? Who is looking out for you? In Memphis, they split the city of Memphis into a district that is like spread across by hundreds of miles. So whoever represents that district, if they're a Democrat or Republican, they can't give the same amount of attention to everybody. So someone is going to lose, and that's a travesty.
Dr. Let me tell you something. This isn't about bringing home the bacon, unfortunately. This isn't about normal politics. Let's stop pretending this is normal. This is specifically about power engineering, plain and simple. And listen, this is not my opinion. This actually is history. This is history. When they find themselves at a deficit or at a possibility of losing, at a possibility of equality, what do? In my opinion, it's what this looks like. They cheat, right? They cheat. They change the goalposts. And that's the part that's unsettling, because it's not about what you're doing for the people in your territory anymore, right? This is simply about power engineering. This is simply about people wanting to take the power. If you don't see it, all of us, I feel like I can not only see it, Ray Charles can see this, that they are taking away all power from people of color and their communities, because we are a threat. It's not about the bacon. It's not about what's good for everybody. No, this is about, we want to transition power. And that's what they're doing right in front of our faces, using the Supreme Court to do it.
Well, speaking of the Supreme Court, Al and Vincent, NBC News reporting the Supreme Court is facing new criticism for redistricting decisions so close to the 2026 election. I mean, to your point, Al, around power engineering, it's hard to ignore this. The Supreme Court has frequently actually admonished judges not to interfere in election cases when the process is already underway. But it's now being accused of doing exactly that in recent decisions favoring Republicans in these redistricting fights. We know that the court ruling in the case from Louisiana that weakened the Voting Rights Act, it set off a whole frenzy in some Republican-led states to draw new congressional maps that favor their party. The stakes are high ahead of the midterm election. We know that. And a midterm election that will determine which party controls the House, which means what party controls the power to investigate, to issue subpoenas, right? Where we can have a meaningful discussion and meaningful action around reforming the courts, around what will be the ethical standards of the courts. And so, Vincent, are we watching, like, where can we turn? Because we would typically turn to the courts. When we look back at history, as Al was sharing earlier, right? When we study, the engineering and the reverse engineering of activists and advocates during the civil rights movement, a lot of that fight was in the courts, but now it seems that the courts are being turned against the people.
Mm-hmm. Well, before it was in the courts, it was in the streets. And there were Black leaders who organized and they won. And we're seeing that again today. There are groups like Black Voters Matter that work in Georgia, Alabama, all across the South. There are groups like the Mississippi NAACP that I'm here right now in Philadelphia, where there are hundreds of organizers from across the country who are talking about this work. They are talking about what they are doing, what they have been doing, how they have been preparing for this moment, and connecting with donors and funders to be able to make sure they have money to do that work. So people can go to beyondimpact.org and find out more about these organizations. They can also just go to Black Voters Matters Fund. They can go to the Mississippi and the NAACP and give their money, because there's going to be people on the ground in Mississippi, in Alabama, in Louisiana who are going to fight to make sure that our democracy is not stolen from us.
You know what, Dr. Nii-Quartelai, I already told you, y'all are a little bit too buttoned up for me. Brother Vincent sounds just like a CEO, and he's correct. We've got to mobilize. We got to give money. But to me, this is where the credibility starts to crack. We saw it crack with this administration as it surrounded politics. Now we're seeing a crack in what we thought we could always count on, which was the Supreme Court to do the right thing. That's where it's messing with my head, right? The Supreme Court has been very clear in the past. Let's be very clear about that. Don't mess with election rules close to voting. But now all of a sudden, we're messing with the election rules close to voting. So it's fair for us to think, it's fair for us to believe, are we following principle, or are we moving the goalposts when it's convenient, once again, surrounding the power of this administration? But see, this is where it gets a little bit sticky, because timing matters. And when decisions like this drop right before major elections, that is when you feel like someone has pulled the carpet right out from under your feet, and it doesn't feel neutral at all. It feels strategic, and it feels dirty politically. And once the public starts questioning the referee, the whole game starts to look rigged. And that's what I'm hoping happens here as they expose the underbelly of the Supreme Court.
Well, let me tell you, the underbelly of the Supreme Court is showing, and has no reason wearing a top crop here. It is a reminder of the history that we hearken back to, the Taney Court, which is led by Chief Justice Roger B. Taney, who was primarily known for the infamous Dred Scott decision. Widely considered the worst Supreme Court in history. For folks who are less familiar, the Dred Scott decision was a 7-2 decision. And the court ruled that Congress lacked the authority to ban slavery in the U.S. territory. And so we have seen the Supreme Court operate under a time of regression, has acted to take away rights, take away freedom, take away liberty. When we come forward, we've got to be on the lookout for some of the same challenges particularly groups on the left. Groups on the left. There are reports that Trump's counterterrorism strategy is putting a focus on left-wing, so-called violent secular groups. We're going to talk all about that and more when we come forward. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai and really delighted to be in conversation with my friends, my brothers, Vincent Jones, who is the CEO of Beyond Impact, and Al Reynolds. There's no one like him. He is our political and pop culture contributor, and we are here to go beyond the headlines. We want to make it plain. We want to set the record straight. And provide you with news and information that you can trust. Let me tell you, I was really disturbed by this next headline, guys. The fact that Trump's counterterrorism strategy is putting a focus on left-wing, so-called violent secular groups. Let me explain. The Trump administration's long-awaited counterterrorism strategy is going to put a focus on left-wing, again, so-called violent secular groups that officials argue are responsible for most of the politically motivated assassination attempts and other violence in recent years. I'm disturbed by this, and I think both Republican, Democrats, Independents, everybody should be disturbed by this, right? Because whether it's happening under a Republican administration or it happens under a future Democratic administration, it's some dangerous stuff. Vincent, Beyond Impact works with a whole wide range of groups, including what many folks will call leftist groups out there. You're very familiar with the history of who gets labeled or mislabeled, a terrorist, a threat to national security. Talk to us about what you're hearing from some of the groups that maybe lawyering up and maybe preparing to have to defend themselves against a smear campaign propagated by its own government.
Well, we're one of those groups, and we've been preparing for this for the past 2 years, and so have a number of other groups, because they've been building this case, and we expected it to happen around this time. Why? Because going to Al's point before, is getting close to elections. And they want us to be focused on fighting with their BS and not doing the work to engage our communities in the civic process. We should be worried that we're dealing with this, because in a healthy democracy, civic participation should not be treated as suspicious. It should not be considered a terroristic act to hold true to power. It's our First Amendment right. But what the average person doesn't realize who's listening, that every dollar that is spent on a law firm or a lawyer is money that is not spent feeding somebody at a homeless shelter, and doing work with children, doing work to improve our air, our water. So all this money that's going to private industry, private sector lawyers, because of the Trump administration, is not being spent doing a good work. And we should all be worried about that.
We should all be worried, and we are worried. Al, what's your message to folks in Hollywood? We grew up in a time where we saw a lot of profiles and courage coming out of Hollywood. I'm thinking about some of the darkest days around the HIV/AIDS crisis. We grew up watching award shows where we saw more celebrities than not wearing AIDS ribbons and doing things in solidarity. What's your message to folks in Hollywood and the whole influencer class? I mean, this is a clear and present danger.
Right.
To organizations out there doing great work. What's your message to them?
The message is easy here, and it's something that we probably, as we filter through this administration for however long it's going to be in power. Number one, Hollywood, we have to demand transparency. This is one time where there's not an option whether you should contact members of Congress. It's not an option to ask for hearings on how threats are defined and also prioritize. Another thing that the message to Hollywood that I would give is that we have to support watchdog organizations. We have to support organizations like Vincent Jones. We have to make sure that civil liberty groups track abuse of power. We have to make sure that they file lawsuits when policies cross legal lines. And we're seeing that happen daily right now, right? But the biggest thing is you have to watch shows like this one. You have to stay informed. You don't let narratives go unchallenged. You got to push for fact-based conversations, because what you're being fed by the media and by the administration is the opposite. And last but not least, you got to vote for oversight, not just leadership. That has got to change, Dr. Nii-Quartelai. Unfortunately, Congress controls funding. Oversight controls national security. Let's be very clear.
I mean, let me say something. I've just got to say, Al Reynolds for Congress. I mean,
yes.
I mean, look, I talk to a lot of folks on Capitol Hill every single day. And, I think there's some folks who've been there where maybe the fight has faded. They're a little fatigued. And so I would add to your list, that beautiful list that you've just shared with us, Al, public service. I think we need, a whole nother generation of folks to take on the very noble calling of public service. You ain't got to do it for a lifetime.
Yeah.
In fact, we need to normalize not being in public service for a lifetime, right? But we need the best and brightest in positions of leadership and oversight. To your point, I would also add there's an app called Interval News, and I would encourage our leaders, learners, and listeners to download that app. I utilize that app. It was just it just came out earlier this year, and what I love about it, and this is me just telling you because I don't have no deal with no Interval News yet.
Yes.
Yeah, let me be clear, Interval News. You can DM me. But what I love about what they do is basically, they it's an aggregate, and they curate a number of different stories that have different levels of coverage. And so some stories have more universal coverage, some have more moderate coverage, and some stories are suppressed. Yes. In 2026, the year of our Lord, there are some stories that are suppressed on the internet. They're suppressed on news sites. And so you can see what those stories are. And so each and every day, as we go through the good, bad, and ugly headlines of the day, I always incorporate some of the suppressed stories, and I use the Interval News app as a tool to be able to do that. So y'all ain't got to wait on me from 4 to 6, Monday through Thursday, right here on the More Perfect Union. Y'all can do it for yourselves any day and all day. Vincent, I want to talk about Southern Poverty Law Center. Last time you were here, we talked a little bit about them. I think there is cause for concern. A lot of folks who know the history of the Southern Poverty Law Center know that they survived firebombs, they survived death threats, they've survived a lot. But some folks not so sure, will they survive Trump 2.0? We know in late April, federal prosecutors announced an indictment against the Southern Poverty Law Center, alleging criminal fraud. The Justice Department accused SPLC of misrepresenting the true nature of bank accounts it maintained to pay confidential informants. It also claims that the nonprofit defrauded its donors by saying it was fighting extremism when it was in fact funding extremism, they say, through the payment and placement of informants with extreme groups like the KKK. Are they going to be able to survive this, Vincent, or has the SPLC perhaps taken on too much water?
I mean, I'm a very hopeful person, and I believe very fervently that we will win. I believe SPLC will win. And isn't it ironic that the government is trying to take them down for doing the same thing that law enforcement do? Don't law enforcement agencies give money and aid and make deals with informants to get information? And so it's just odd to me that this is the crux of their case. The Trump administration has tried to go after law firms, after universities. Now they're going after civil society groups like SPLC. And in every situation, they have lost because the courts have been on our side. Now, the key is we can't back down. Some of the law firms back down, some of the universities back down, but we can no longer back down. We have to stand up stronger. We have to stand with SPLC. And actually, while we were talking, I got a text from a friend of mine who works there, and she talked about how this Saturday on May 16th, there's a National Day of Action for Voting Rights, and it's being co-sponsored by the No Kings movement. It's you can go to allroadsleadtothe-south.com, allroadsleadtothe-south.com, and find out how you can get involved. So it's a national day of protest because if they're not sitting now, they're fighting back, and we should join them.
That's right. That's right. Al, what say you? I mean, this is serious business. I mean, we have a number of civil rights groups, legal defense funds that we typically turn to in moments of crisis, where you have the Trump Justice Department that is bringing the smoke to them. So to the point that Vincent was making earlier, this really ties them up, not completely, but ties up a great deal of their capacity to be able to do the work that we need more now than ever.
Right. Well, let me tell you something. Oh Lord, I think I'm getting too emotional for this for this session tonight. Okay, because it's just everything is just very serious. Everything is top of mind. Everybody needs to get focused. Everybody needs to get serious. When organizations that monitor, in my mind, this is how it works. When organizations that monitor extremism come under pressure, citizens, everybody need to do two things at the same time. Number one, we have to demand accountability. Okay, cool. But we also have to demand fairness. Let's be very clear. You don't blindly defend, but you also don't ignore patterns. And what we're seeing are patterns, okay? You watch the process closely. You ask whether the standards are being applied across the board, because what we're seeing is that they are not. Because if enforcement, like what we are realizing in real time, starts to feel selective, it doesn't just impact one organization. It sends a message to every watchdog group in the country, and that message matters. For me, I just feel like it's interesting because these are always, the SPLC has always been like in some mess, right? Which I love. Like, of course, I would. But we have to support or we have to scrutinize, but be informed is what I'm saying. And also protect the role at all costs of watchdogs.
Yes, that's right. Final word on SPLC, Vincent?
The other part that people don't realize that this has triggered something that has not happened before that I'm aware of. Fidelity and I'm forgetting the other bank, they have over $1.5 billion in charitable assets, and that are held by donor advised funds. Fidelity is the largest charitable organization in the United States. They have said that they're not going to allow their donor advised fund holders to give money to SPLC because they have been accused of being terrorists. So now, if they can do this in this situation, how will that impact other orgs down the road? So this situation that that Trump has started is going to have huge ripple effects, and we have to be able to really stop this right now.
Absolutely. That's why, Dr. Nii-Quartelai, I know we have to move on, but that's why I say demand consistency. Are laws being applied equally across all groups? Across all groups. And obviously what we're seeing is that's not happening.
Well, let me tell you something. This is what I want to know. And now you got me going down a rabbit hole, Vincent. I want to know Fidelity, and the folks from Fidelity are welcome to join us here on A More Perfect Union anytime to clarify. But this posture that they've adopted, this policy that they're employing directed towards SPLC, did they do the same thing with the Oath Keepers?
There you go.
No.
Did they do the same thing with the other groups that were involved with January 6th when they were accused? No. Did they do that even after they were convicted? These are questions that need answers. When we come forward, it's time for the quiet part out loud. The Justice Department officials are considering actually settling a Trump suit against the IRS. I'm going to give Vincent and Al an opportunity to sound off. You're listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. In our remaining minutes with Vincent Jones and Al Reynolds, let me just shine a light on what looks like and smells like corruption to me. The Justice Department officials are considering settling a Trump suit against the IRS. New York Times reporting that the Justice Department is holding internal discussions, not at a House oversight or Senate oversight meeting, but internal discussions about settling President Trump's lawsuit against the IRS in the coming days. Whether to settle the suit and on what terms, it remains up in the air. One of the settlement options that the Justice Department and White House officials are reviewing is the possibility of the IRS dropping any audits of Trump, his family members, or businesses. I want to remind people that in January, Trump, along with two of his sons and the Trump family business, sued the IRS for at least $10 billion over the leak of their tax returns during the president's first term. Vincent, what say you? Is the Justice Department going to give Trump what he's asking for?
I mean, they've been doing that for the past 2 years. Most people think when the IRS comes knocking, you get an accountant. Apparently now you got to win a presidency, because then you can not only get the case dropped, but maybe get some money out of it. I am just like annoyed beyond belief. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that the person who's supposed to be leading the country is really trying to shake us down again and again and again. That's erodes trust from the public. The average person who's working hard to pay the rent and pay their light bills and get groceries, and then then they have to deal with taxes and say, well, the president doesn't have to do it. Why should I?
Yeah.
Exactly. Let me tell you something. Can the president, for those technicians out there, can the president sue a lawsuit against the government? Absolutely, he can. Yes, the Justice Department can settle that case, but it's called the standard. Is that standard practice? Yes, but come on, everybody. Think about this for what it is. The same administration now has authority over whether that payout happens, and that payout could come from taxpayers' money. That's what you need to know. The rich are not paying for that. It's us that work hard. It's going to be some type of new tax or some type of new law, tax law, that's going to force us to pay for this. And that's not fair.
It's a slap in the face to working people across this country. It is corruption. It is corruption. There's no other way to look at this. This isn't a matter of, just finding a loophole in IRS policy. No. This is how you gonna say no to the boss? Right, the boss just sued you for $10 billion. The boss appointed his former defense attorney, who is now the acting attorney general of the United States. He appointed the person who's leading the IRS. How do you say no to the boss? You can't say no to the boss. And so we're going to continue to lift up these stories so people understand what's really going on in your name. We're going to have to leave it there. My thanks to Vincent Jones, the CEO of Beyond Impact, and Al Reynolds, our resident political and pop culture contributor. I want to thank the entire village helps us produce a more perfect union each and every day, including our executive producer, Tabitha Smiley, our sound engineer, brother Andy, our show producers, Art Sears and Faraji Muhammad, and our social media guy, Amir Black. Remember, don't panic, organize, do what you can from where you are with what you have, but by all means, do something. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai. You've been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.